All right, welcome to part 2 of this full screen effect screen transition tutorial. In the last scene, or sorry, I got Unity on the brain. In the last tutorial, what we did was we created the actual full screen post-processing script, and the tutorial or the shader that's going to switch between two scenes, and what it's going to do is it's just going to fade from the full what the camera sees to black. That's all this shader does. Very simple. There's 5 nodes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to set up two scenes, and I'm going to set up a simple script that we can run and switch between the two scenes with a fade. So let's dive right in. So we're going to create two scenes in this folder that we've got here. So I'm just going to go create, and where's scene? It's somewhere around here. There we go. So we're going to say, we're just going to call it scene 1. And then we are going to create another scene, and you guessed it, we'll call it scene 2. And then we're going to create a script that we can attach. We'll attach it right to the camera, I think, just because, well, for this purpose anyway. That will work just fine. So C# script. So we're going to say, we're just going to call it scene switcher. Okay, let's let that compile. And then we are going to open up the scene switcher. I'm going to get rid of the start and the update because we do not need those. And we do need something from Unity though. We need to use Unity engine.scene management. This just allows you to switch scenes through code. So we're now going to create a public void called switch scenes, or switch scene, we'll call it, not plural. And we need to take in two things here. We need to take in a string, and this will be what the scene is called that we want to load. So we'll just say scene name. And then we also want something else. We want a float, and we're going to call this transition time. Cool. So now that we have that, we're also going to create a coroutine. And we will call this coroutine, I don't know, we'll just call it transition for now. Okay, we'll take in that float, transition time. And we are going to say, we're also going to take in, what else do we need to take in here? Actually, you know what? I should probably create 2 of these. So this one will be transition out. So it will transition out of a scene. Okay. And we just need the transition time there. So we are now going to say, let's just put in a, let's leave that how it is, and let's say, so we're going to do the transition here. So we're going to say float timer equals 0. So we're gonna keep a time that we can iterate on, and we're going to say while that timer is less than transition time, do this. So we're going to say timer plus equals time.delta time. Of course, we need that. And then we're going to say yield return null. So that's just going to skip a frame. And then we are going to say, this is where we transition the actual material. So we actually need a, to keep track of the material. So probably the best case for us is we're going to grab that, well, so we can do this one of 2 ways. And I think the best way is to actually keep a reference of that custom post processor that we made. Remember that? Is that the right one? Custom post processing? Yep. I also have a reference one. So, and we'll just say, what's called CPP. Okay. And we're actually going to keep this on the camera as well. So what we can do is we can just keep it private, and then we can do a private void on awake. Oops. Awake. Wow. My spelling is great as usual. And on our wake, we're just going to say cpp equals get component custom post processing. Okay. And then on that custom post processing, we're going to actually want this. Oh, we already have it as a public material, so we're golden. Now we want to grab ccp.material. So dot post processing material. We're going to set a float. And this is just going to be the transition float. So we will actually call it, well, we should actually see what we called it in. So we called it fade. But I think what we're going to do is we're actually going to change this from being fade to transition. And that way we can call it the exact same thing in all the transitions we make. And this script can do its thing no matter what transition it is, right? So we're going to, so this just gets, so we're setting a float, and I'm passing in the name right here, transition. So that's, and you have to put this underscore for any shader variables that you're changing with set float or set color, any of the sets, basically. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to give it a value. So we're going to go mathf.lerp, because we want to go from one value to another, right? We're going to go from 0 to 1. And we're going to say timer divided by transition time. So that's just going to lerp from 0 to 1 over a time. And that's basically it. And then at the very end of this transition, we actually want to switch the scene, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to call this switch scene method, but it's going to start this transition. And then once the transition's done, then we actually switch the scene. So we're going to say scene, scene manager dot load scene. And this takes in a string, whatever scene you want. So we're actually going to have that string be passed from here. So I forgot to put that in here. So we'll say string scene name, because we're going to pass it from here to here, and we're going to use it right here. And that's just going to switch the scene for us. So switch scene. Trying to think if this is going to be okay. I think it's going to be okay, but what we might want to do is just have a public variable up here for transition time. Public float transition time, and we'll give that a default of, I don't know, 1 second is probably fine. Okay, and then we don't need this. We can pass it in there as well, but let's just do it this way for now. So we're going to say start coroutine. It should be transition out. Okay, and then we want a scene name. So we're just going to type in the scene name, which we already passed in right here. And that pretty much does it for this script. There's a couple little issues we might have to take care of later, but let's go back to Unity for now. All right, and let's put our why do I keep saying that? Swing switcher. What a weird word. I will put that on the camera as well. And, you know, obviously if you're making like a full-on project, you're going to do this a little differently. This is more just for testing purposes. I don't know if I'd have the scene switcher on a camera. That seems really weird to me, but you'd probably have like, you know, some kind of static thing that doesn't get deleted as scenes change that you can just use and statically call, right? But for this purposes, this will be just fine. So let's make an easy way to switch the scene. Let's make an easy, oops, I didn't want to create an empty. I wanted to create let's create a UI canvas, and yeah, we'll just call it canvas, that's fine. And we're just gonna make a button, that's it. So we'll make a button, and let's make sure it's in the center, which it already is. And let's make sure, I just want to make sure, okay, so that's what it looks like right now. It's probably fine, but let's make it like really big just so we can see. Let's make it like 600 by 80. Can't really miss that. And we'll just call it switch to scene 2. Okay. And I'm still in my sample scene, which is unfortunate. I should probably do this in my non-sample scene. So what I'll do is I'll switch to scene 1, and I will add my custom post-processing. I will add my material. I've got a bunch of materials in here because of all the other tutorials. No problem. I will click this on, and then I will add the scene switcher. Okay. So let's do that again. Let's go UI, canvas, and under here we'll go UI button, and we'll make it ridiculously big, 600 by 80, and we will call it switch to scene 2. Okay, I'll save that, and I'll copy this, and actually I'll copy both of these. I should have done this the first time. I'll get rid of this camera here, and I will copy. So now we got our same camera. We've got our canvas, but we're going to switch this button to switch to scene 1. Okay, so it's going to switch back and forth. So now we have to do a few things. We have to make sure the button actually does something. So again, simplicity purposes, I'm just going to drag the main camera into the on click here. So I made a new on click, drag the camera into there, and let's go to the scene switcher, and we'll say switch scenes, and we will switch to, we're going to pass in a string here, so we'll call it scene 1, right? Because this is scene 2, we want to go back to scene 1. That's all we got to do there. And then we will go to scene 1. We'll go find our button, and we will go ahead and put our main camera in here. Switch scene, and we will switch to scene 2. Okay, so let's hit play and see what happens here. So I'm in scene 1. Hit play. I'm sure something's going to go wrong because it usually does. And we're just going to hit this button. Well, it worked. Well, kind of. Scene 2 couldn't be loaded because it has not been added to build settings. Ah, yes, of course. So, if we go to build settings and we add our opening scene and then we add scene 2. Okay, so now it should work. So, got a nice whistle there in my voice. All right. So switch to scene 2. So you see a little problem that happened there. And then switch to scene 1. Oh. Switch to scene 1 doesn't seem to want to work. So we must have messed something up there. So let's go back to scene 2. Grab our button. Well, that's weird. I have it set up correctly. Okay, so through a bunch of trial and error, I figured out the problem, and I think it's actually a Unity bug. What we did was we went to scene 1, and we copied this canvas and this main camera, and we pasted it in scene 2. And I think that actually caused the bug, because as soon as I deleted this canvas and then created a new one from scratch, exactly the same way, I didn't paste it in, though I actually created it, it started working. So we're good now. So just note that you will have to actually create this canvas from scratch. So now if we switch to scene 1, it will fade out, and I'll go to scene 2 now, or sorry, back to scene 1. If we switch to scene 2, there we go, we're golden. One thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to just quickly, I'm just going to move, go to my scene view here. I'm going to move this button up, and I'm going to go to scene 1, and I'm going to move this button down just a little bit, just so we have a little bit of a difference between the two, because it's kind of hard to tell when we switch. So we switch to scene 1, or switch to scene 2, back to scene 1, golden. So obviously there's some funky things happening, right? First of all, when we switch to a scene, the camera isn't fading back in. So That's something we got to do. So let's do that right now. And the easiest way to do that is in our scene switcher. We're going to say private void on enable. So every time this script is enabled. So basically every time the scene loads, because as soon as the scene loads, it's going to load this script, right? Because it's attached to the camera. We're going to say transition in. Okay, we don't actually have, sorry, it's going to be start coroutine transition in. We don't actually have this transition yet, so we're going to make it. So we will just copy transition out. We don't need to pass in a string name, which is kind of nice. Transition in. We're going to get rid of this load scene at the bottom because we do not want that to happen. We'll keep the timer here, that's fine. We'll use the same transition time that we used up here, so that's fine. Everything else is fine, except we're going to alert from 1 to 0. Okay, so on enable, transition in. Let's see what happens here. So when we load the scene, you should see it. It should be all black, and then you should see it load in. There we go. And when we switch to another scene, it should fade out and then fade in. There we go. We're golden. So that works awesome. The one thing you'll notice is the UI isn't affected because what's happening is this is an effect just on the camera, right? The UI is actually rendering differently. We're using screen space overlay. So what we can do to fix that, I believe, is we can go to the canvas of the UI and we can say screen space camera, and we can drag in the camera. Okay. Oh, I have to, of course, not be in play mode. So screen space camera. Let's try that, just see what happens. There we go. Now, of course, on the next scene, you'll see the button pop over the fade. That's because we didn't do it on that scene, right? So basically what we're saying is the UI should use the camera, and then the camera has the post-processing effect on it, so the UI also inherits that behavior. So, yeah, there we go. That's it for part 2. In part 3, we'll make some different, we'll make some different transitions, some really cool ones. So stick around for that. And yeah, until then, talk to you later.